Racist cops arrest black woman. Freeze when they learn. She's the Chief Justice. Racist cops arrest black woman. Freeze when they learn. She's the Chief Justice. It was close to midnight when Simone Bellamy stepped out of the Baltimore Legal Aid Center, the city still humming with life despite the hour. She had stayed late, reviewing pro bono appeals for low-income families, something the Chief Justice of Maryland technically didn't have to do anymore. But Simone had never been the type to retreat behind marble walls and mahogany chambers, not when real people still bled under a broken system. Wearing dark jeans, sneakers, and a navy hoodie pulled tight against the cold, she looked like any other tired professional heading home after a long day. Her robe and gavel were miles away, locked inside her chambers at the state Supreme Courthouse. Her phone buzzed with a missed call from Elijah Marks, the state's special prosecutor and longtime friend. She smiled. He was probably checking on her again. Ever since she quietly returned to Baltimore's East Side, Elijah had been wary. "You're too recognizable," he'd warned. "Not when I'm dressed like this," she had said. "Besides, I blend in just fine when I'm not in heels and headlines." But blending in, it turned out, wasn't enough tonight. As she turned the corner onto Linden Avenue, 2 squad cars pulled up with sirens blaring and headlights cutting through the dark. She flinched at the blinding glare. "Hands where we can see them!" a voice barked. Simone squinted into the light. "Excuse me." "Now!" the voice shouted again. "Turn around! Face the wall!" A pair of officers emerged, both white, both armed, both tense. One was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that barely masked contempt. Officer Grant Maddox. The other, Officer Riley Boone, was younger but already wearing the arrogance of someone who believed the badge made him immune. Simone raised her hands slowly, calm but firm. "Officers, I think you're making a mistake." Maddox didn't hesitate. He grabbed her wrist roughly and shoved her toward the brick wall. "We got a call about a black woman casing parked cars in this neighborhood. You match the description." "I just came from—" she began, but Boone yanked her hoodie down, nearly choking her. "You got ID?" he asked sharply. "It's in my bag, inside my office." "Just a few blocks from here." Maddox scoffed. "How convenient. No ID, walking alone in a high-theft zone." "That's strike 3. Simone looked him dead in the eyes. "You haven't even told me what I'm being accused of." "You don't get to ask questions," Maddox sneered, snapping a zip tie around her wrists. "You'll get answers at the precinct." As they shoved her into the back of the squad car, she caught the eye of a young man filming from his phone across the street. Their gazes locked. He seemed unsure, hesitant. "Keep recording," she mouthed, barely audible. The doors slammed shut. Inside the cruiser, Simone's heart pounded, not from fear, but from disbelief. She had ruled on constitutional cases, struck down illegal surveillance programs, reformed juvenile sentencing in the state. And here she was, being treated like a criminal for the crime of walking while black. Boone glanced back through the cage. "She's awfully calm." "Maybe she's high." Maddox laughed. "They get real quiet when they know they're screwed." Simone said nothing. Back at the precinct, they walked her in through the rear entrance, avoiding the main lobby. The desk sergeant barely looked up. The holding cells were mostly empty, except for a drunk man shouting nonsense from the far corner. "No phone call," Maddox told the sergeant. "She's being held pending verification." Simone's voice cut through the room. "I'd like to speak with my attorney." Maddox leaned in close, voice low and dripping with disdain. "You think dropping legal terms is gonna help you now? Lady, you're nothing but another name on paper tonight." Simone stared him down. "You have no idea who you're talking to." Boone scoffed. "Oh, We got ourselves a queen. They placed her in a windowless room, just a metal chair, a table, and a buzzing overhead light. The hours dragged, no water, no phone. Just silence and the sound of her breath, steady, controlled. In the observation room behind the two-way mirror, Officer Carla Jennings watched it all unfold. She was the only black officer on shift that night, and her gut twisted with every second Simone sat in that chair. There was something off. Simone didn't look confused. She looked deliberate. Focused. As if she were letting this happen. Jennings pulled up a chair next to Sergeant Collins, who was reviewing paperwork. You run her prints yet? No match. No record. Jennings frowned. And you're holding her why? Suspicion of attempted theft. Based on? Collins shrugged. Description matched. Maddox brought her in. You know how he is. Jennings stood. That's the problem. Back in the interrogation room, Simone finally spoke again, this time calmly, directly to the surveillance camera in the corner. My name is Simone Bellamy. I am Chief Justice of the Maryland State Supreme Court. Badge number 87304. You are violating both state and federal law by detaining me without due process. This recording will be admissible in court. Maddox stormed in seconds later, face flushed. What kind of game are you playing? I don't play games, Simone replied evenly. But I do write opinions on cases like unlawful detention and civil rights violations. Would you like me to cite a few precedents? Boone followed behind, slamming a file on the table. You're lying. I don't need to lie. You'll find out soon enough. At that moment, the precinct phone rang, then again, and again. The front desk officer called out, Sarge? Line 1 says it's the governor's office. Boone paled. Another officer appeared in the hallway. We just got a call from the U.S. Marshal Service. They're asking for immediate release of a Simone Bellamy, Chief Justice. Maddox staggered back. Jennings was already moving. She burst into the room and unlocked Simone's cuffs. Justice Bellamy, she said with visible shame. I'm so sorry. Simone stood slowly, rubbing her wrists. Not your fault, but now it's your responsibility. Boone tried to speak. We didn't know. You didn't say anything. Simone turned to face him, her voice low and searing. I shouldn't have to. The precinct fell silent. Outside, media had already gathered. Word had spread fast. The young man who filmed her arrest had posted the video. It had gone viral within 2 hours. Hashtags surged. Reporters yelled questions. Cameras flashed. Simone stepped out, flanked by Jennings and U.S. Marshals. Someone shouted, "Why didn't you tell them who you were?" She stopped at the top of the precinct steps. Because every black woman in this country deserves to walk free without needing a title to protect her. And with that, she walked down the steps into a sea of lights. But the real spotlight, the one she intended to shine, was just beginning to burn. By sunrise, the precinct where Simone Bellamy had been wrongfully detained was the center of a media firestorm. Every major outlet had caught wind of what had happened overnight. Footage of her being shoved into a squad car, hands zip-tied, hood down, played on a loop across morning broadcasts. Pundits were already dissecting it. Hashtags had taken over every social platform, and her face, still calm despite everything, was suddenly everywhere. But inside the walls of the state's justice system, the reaction was far less public and far more personal. In the governor's office, a tense closed-door meeting was underway. Governor Diane Walcott, a longtime ally of Simone's, stood beside a conference table stacked with folders, court records, and security transcripts. She didn't tell anyone who she was, Walcott muttered, pacing. She let herself be booked like a suspect. Across the table, Elijah Marks rubbed his temples. She didn't let it happen, Diane. She wanted it to. She baited the system. On purpose. Why? The governor snapped. Because she knew it would expose them. Elijah passed a thin file across the table. Inside were sealed records, previously confidential, now declassified under Simone's emergency judicial authority. The names of officers Grant Maddox and Riley Boone were listed multiple times, across excessive force complaints, false arrests, suppressed body cam footage. Each incident had been quietly buried or dismissed. Simone had been tracking them. Quietly, patiently, strategically. She's been building this case, Elijah said, and now she has the country's full attention. Meanwhile, back at the state Supreme Courthouse, Simone stood in her chambers, her navy judicial robe hanging untouched behind the door. She wasn't wearing it today. Instead, she wore a simple gray dress and her natural curls pulled back in a loose bun. A subtle but deliberate message, one of humility and clarity. Agent Natalie Trujillo, a federal civil rights investigator, stood opposite her, arms folded. You knew we were circling those officers, Trujillo said, but you didn't wait. You walked right into it. Simone handed her a folder. Inside was a handwritten statement, a list of names, and an audio transcript from the interrogation room, her own words, invoking her title, her rights, and her accusation. They weren't just abusing the system, Simone said. They were a product of it. And I needed the country to see what that looked like up close. Trujillo hesitated. You're risking your reputation. Simone looked her in the eyes. No. I'm reclaiming the truth. Across town, Officer Carla Jennings was facing her own fire. She had spent the morning being questioned by internal affairs, some of them curious, some of them clearly resentful. A black officer speaking out against her colleagues wasn't something the department looked kindly on. You knew who she was before the others did, one investigator challenged. I recognized her from a policy conference last year, Jennings replied. But more than that, I recognized how wrong it felt. Why didn't you intervene sooner? I did, she said, firm. I released her, and I'd do it again. They didn't say it aloud, but she knew she was being watched now. Labeled. Later that afternoon, Simone held a press conference outside the courthouse. The steps were packed. Reporters, activists, even former foster kids she had ruled for in court. When the microphones were set and silence fell over the crowd, Simone didn't begin with legal jargon or condemnation. She began with something else. I was arrested last night for walking home after work. I wasn't dressed like a judge. I wasn't escorted, I wasn't protected, and in those moments I wasn't seen as a person. I was seen as a threat. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could have stopped it, she continued. I could have said my name, called a contact, demanded recognition. But that's the problem, isn't it? Why should someone's safety depend on status? She paused, then lifted her hand, revealing the bruises still dark around her wrists. This is the price of silence. Of profiling, of fear disguised as policy, and I'm done letting that slide. The reporters erupted with questions, but she waved them off. This isn't just about me. It's about what happens when justice wears a badge and forgets what it stands for. Behind her, a group of state officials looked increasingly uneasy. One of them, Charles Whitmore, the head of the state police union, stepped back and whispered to an aide, "She's going to tear the whole department down." He wasn't wrong. The next morning, Officers Maddox and Boone were officially suspended, not terminated, not yet. The department claimed it was pending further investigation. But by then, public pressure had swelled into outrage. Petitions, protests, op-eds, even late-night hosts weighed in. "She was the Chief Justice of the state," one segment read. "If that's how they treat her, imagine the rest of us." Simone watched the coverage from her living room, Tyrell, her younger brother, sitting beside her. A former public defender turned legal activist. He had always been the one pushing her to fight from the inside. Now he saw her doing both. "You sure you're ready for what comes next?" he asked. "I've spent a lifetime inside the law," she said. "It's time I reminded who it's supposed to serve." Outside, more protesters had begun to gather near City Hall, not because she called them, but because her silence had done enough. Now her truth was doing the rest. And somewhere in a cramped precinct office, a trembling hand reached for a hidden file drawer. A captain stared at the documents inside, unsure how long he had left before someone came knocking. Simone Bellamy was no longer just a judge. She was the reckoning, and this was just the beginning. The knock came just after midnight. Simone had just finished reviewing a set of transcripts from the Civil Rights Division when the sound pulled her away from the screen. At first, she thought it might be her brother Tyrell again, forgetting his keys. But when she opened the door, it wasn't family. It was Agent Natalie Trujillo, standing in the hallway with two federal marshals behind her. "We need to talk," Natalie said, her voice tight. Inside, under the low kitchen light, Trujillo spread out 3 photographs on the table. Each showed different black individuals, men, women, even a teenager, all of them bruised, some bloodied, each image taken inside the same district holding cell, the 12th precinct. Simone picked up the photo of the teenager. A boy, 17. His name was Elijah Cordero. She'd seen his name before, buried in a file that never made it to trial. Disorderly conduct. Case dismissed. "He was arrested for loitering in front of a store he worked at," Natalie explained. "Turns out Officers Maddox and Boone were involved. Again." Simone's jaw tightened. "So this goes back further than we thought." Trujillo nodded. "Years. We believe they've been using unofficial detainment, off-the-record bookings that never make it to court. No charges, just trauma. And now? Now we have a witness, someone who worked in booking, a clerk named Jonah Perez. He came forward after your arrest went viral, said he was threatened to stay quiet, said there's a logbook hidden. With names they never meant to record." Simone exhaled slowly, trying to keep the fury from cracking through her voice. "Where is Jonah now?" "In protective custody, but he's agreed to speak under sealed deposition." Simone stood and paced, the memory of her own cuff still raw around her wrists. "If we expose this, we're not just talking about excessive force. This is conspiracy, illegal detainment, institutional cover-up." Trujillo met her eyes. "And it won't just be Maddox and Boone. It'll bring in the precinct captain. Maybe higher." For a long moment, Simone said nothing. Then finally she nodded. "I want to hear his deposition myself." The next day, inside a secured conference room in the federal building downtown, Jonah Perez sat with shaking hands and a legal pad filled with notes. A wiry man in his mid-30s, he looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. His voice cracked as he spoke. "They used a red marker," he began. "Every time someone came in they didn't want logged, they'd mark it with a red X in the corner of the holding sheet. Those names were never entered into the digital system. It was invisible processing. If someone asked, they'd say the person never came in." Simone leaned forward. "How many names?" Jonah swallowed. "At least 200. Maybe more." Her blood ran cold. "They told me if I talked I'd lose my job, or worse." "You did the right thing now," she said softly. But in her mind, she was already calculating how far this went. How many children like Elijah Cordero? How many adults with charges that never existed? That afternoon, she walked into the State Judiciary Oversight Board unannounced. The marble halls, once a place of professional distance, now felt like a battlefield. People stepped aside as she passed, whispering. Inside the boardroom, 5 members sat behind a long, polished desk. Some she knew well, others she'd clashed with. At the head sat Chancellor Robert Malloy, a man who had once called Simone overly passionate in a public interview. "Justice Bellamy," he greeted with wary politeness. "We weren't expecting you." Simone placed a thick file on the table, filled with photos, transcripts, booking logs, and a signed affidavit from Jonah Perez. "You are now," she said. She laid out the pattern, case by case. Illegal detentions, unreported arrests, a shadow system targeting young black and brown citizens, many of whom had no criminal records. When she finished, there was silence. Then Malloy cleared his throat. "You're asking us to open an emergency hearing against active officers, based on evidence that's still being verified." "No," Simone said. "I'm telling you. I'm invoking Article 14, Emergency Judicial Authority. I have the right to petition for immediate suspension pending investigation. And I am." Another member spoke. "That article hasn't been used in over 20 years. Then it's overdue." By evening, word had leaked. Simone Bellamy had filed for emergency suspension of multiple officers, naming not only Maddox and Boone, but their captain and 3 others. The governor's office issued a statement of support. Civil rights organizations lit up with praise. But not everyone was pleased. Inside the 12th precinct, Captain Walter Shaw watched the news with a scowl. He slammed his hand down on the desk. "She's going to burn the whole house down," he growled. One of his lieutenants tried to calm him. "It's just political noise. It'll blow over." "No, it won't," Shaw snapped. "Not if she finds the tapes." The lieutenant hesitated. "You said they were wiped." "Not all of them." For the first time in years, Walter Shaw felt fear creeping in. He'd been too confident, too used to silence. But Simone wasn't just loud, she was relentless. Back in her home, Simone sat with Tyrell, the night quiet, except for the occasional honk from a distant street. "You sure you want to go this far?" he asked. "This isn't just courtroom strategy anymore." "You're declaring war." She stared at the red marker logbook in her lap. "No," she replied. "I'm ending one." He reached across and gripped her hand. "Then let's end it right." Simone nodded, because what started as a wrongful arrest had now uncovered something darker, deeper, and far more dangerous. But she wasn't backing down. She was just getting started. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp. By 9:45, the marble steps of the Georgia State Justice Center were flooded with reporters, civil rights activists, and community leaders. Every camera was pointed toward the podium, every microphone angled to catch a soundbite. They weren't just here for headlines. They were here to witness the moment the most powerful judicial figure in the state stood her ground against the very system that tried to silence her. Simone Bellamy adjusted the cuffs of her blazer as she stood behind the curtain, breathing deep. Her heart thudded loud in her ears, but her face remained unreadable. On the surface, she looked every bit the poised Chief Justice. But inside, she was still carrying the weight of a little girl whose father was once pulled from their car at gunpoint for a broken tail light. Natalie Trujillo appeared at her side. "You sure you want to say all this publicly? Once it's out there, there's no walking it back." "I don't want to walk it back," Simone said, steady. "I want it to run straight through every corner of that system and set fire to the parts that need burning." Natalie gave a small, grim smile. Then burn it right. The doors opened. The crowd hushed. Cameras clicked. Simone stepped to the microphone. My name is Simone Bellamy. I am the Chief Justice of the Georgia State Supreme Court. I was unlawfully arrested last week by 2 officers operating under a pattern of racially motivated misconduct. What happened to me is not rare. What is rare is that they picked the wrong black woman this time. The crowd murmured. I'm here not just for myself, but for every voice that was ignored, every child that was labeled aggressive, every parent who told the truth and was punished for it. I am invoking my authority as Chief Justice to open an emergency statewide judicial review into patterns of unlawful arrests, falsified records, and systemic suppression. The gasps weren't just for show. The reporters knew this wasn't politics. This was war. As she stepped away from the podium, reporters called out, Justice Bellamy, do you have proof of this pattern? I do, she said, turning briefly. And it's already in the hands of the Department of Justice. Meanwhile, in a conference room 5 floors above, Captain Walter Shaw was watching the live stream with his attorneys and a state PR handler sweating bullets beside him. She's bluffing, the PR rep muttered. No, she's not, Shaw growled. She has something. She's making a move. Just then, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. There's footage, and someone's about to leak it. Shaw's hand went cold. Later that afternoon, Simone met with U.S. Attorney David Strickland and a panel from the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. She handed over a sealed drive containing over 4 hours of damning evidence, Jonah Perez's hidden files, unlogged arrest sheets, and surveillance footage that wasn't supposed to exist. One clip stood out. A grainy video, time-stamped from 11 months prior, showed Officer Maddox slamming a teenage boy, barely 15, against a squad car. Boone stood beside him, laughing. The boy cried out that he hadn't done anything. His voice was hoarse from pleading. Was this ever reported? Strickland asked. Simone shook her head. The boy was never entered into the system. He was let go 3 hours later without a trace. Strickland leaned back. This isn't just a pattern. It's a coordinated operation. And it's about to blow open, Simone said. Just then, Natalie rushed into the room holding her phone up. We've got a leak. Footage is spreading on social media. Someone released the Maddox dashcam from your arrest. Simone stood watching the video play on screen. It showed Maddox ignoring her ID, refusing to check her credentials, mocking her composure, then using excessive force as he dragged her from the car. The audio was clear. I don't care who you are, lady. You people always think the law doesn't apply to you. Then the kicker, Simone's calm voice rising at the end. And you think your badge will protect you from justice? Let's test that. The video had gone viral. By evening, Justice for Simone was trending nationwide. Civil rights attorneys called for the immediate resignation of officers Maddox and Boone. The mayor issued a statement of support, and federal lawmakers began tweeting about full investigations into racially biased policing. But not everyone was celebrating. Across town, Officer Maddox sat in his apartment, pale and silent. His phone had over 70 missed calls. Someone had tagged his address. Protesters were gathering outside his building. Boone was pacing nearby, rage in his voice. They weren't supposed to find that tape. Shaw said it was gone. Maddox whispered, We picked the wrong one. And for the first time, the men who'd spent their careers intimidating others felt what it meant to be cornered. Back at Simone's home, her brother Tyrell stood at the stove, cooking in silence. Simone entered and leaned against the doorframe. I saw what you said on TV, he murmured. Dad would have been proud. She nodded, voice soft. I'm doing this for him, and for every black man who never made it home because someone decided they looked guilty. Terrell stirred the pot. You going back to court tomorrow? I'm going to the FBI. Then I'm meeting with the Judicial Disciplinary Review Board. If we're going to fix this, it's got to start from the top. He turned to her, brow furrowed. You scared? Simone considered the question, then shook her head. I was scared the night they cuffed me, but fear doesn't live here anymore. Not in me. Not in this house. As she stepped away, Tyrell watched her go, pride in his eyes. Simone wasn't just fighting back. She was rebuilding justice with her own hands, brick by brick, truth by truth. And every lie that had once protected the powerful was now standing in the open, waiting to be judged. The morning air outside the Federal District Court in downtown Atlanta was unusually still, but inside, a storm was brewing. Simone Bellamy stood in the hallway with her attorney Natalie Trujillo, flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals. Every step echoed. Every glance followed her like the weight of 1,000 expectations pressing on her shoulders. Across the city, news vans had lined up since dawn, reporters whispering about subpoenas, grand juries, and secret files that could shake the foundation of the state's justice system. But only a handful of people knew the real truth. Simone wasn't there just to testify. She was there to burn the rot to the ground. The courtroom was closed to the public, an emergency evidentiary hearing ordered by the U.S. Attorney's Office. Inside sat representatives from Internal Affairs, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Justice, and most importantly, a federal judge known for his zero-tolerance approach to institutional cover-ups, Judge Raymond Callahan. The room fell silent as Simone took the witness chair. No black robes, no elevated bench, just a woman with truth on her lips and rage in her bones. Judge Callahan adjusted his glasses. Chief Justice Bellamy, please state for the record the nature of your testimony. Simone's voice was firm. I am here to submit evidence of coordinated corruption, unlawful arrests, falsified records, and racial profiling within the Atlanta Metro Police Department, particularly involving Officers Maddox and Boone, with the complicity of Captain Walter Shaw. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Callahan gave a slight nod. Proceed. Simone leaned forward, opening the file before her. This isn't just about me. I uncovered a pattern. Dozens of complaints were buried, evidence erased. Victims silenced. I brought files pulled from a hidden directory, one not visible in the official APD database. These files were created by a whistleblower inside the department, Jonah Perez. She paused. Jonah is dead now, car crash, officially. But the night before he died, he gave me this drive. Natalie stood and handed a copy to the court clerk. Simone continued. It includes arrest logs that were never filed, video footage, and transcripts showing that these officers regularly targeted black residents, fabricating probable cause, coercing confessions, and in several cases, disappearing complaints altogether. Some of the individuals listed in these files are still missing from the system. Judge Callahan's expression hardened. Missing? Yes, Simone replied. At least 3 teenagers last seen in custody, but no record of their release. One of them is a 16-year-old named Malik Johnson, picked up on a loitering charge. There's body cam footage of his arrest. No footage of his release. Callahan turned to the DOJ counsel. Are you aware of this? The woman nodded solemnly. We are now, Your Honor. Then Natalie stood. We also have sworn statements from 2 former dispatch officers who say they were ordered to delete calls involving certain arrests, and a sealed deposition from a social worker, Lisa Grant, who reported Boone to Internal Affairs last year. Her report vanished. She was demoted 2 weeks later. Callahan glanced at the prosecutor. Issue emergency subpoenas for Captain Shaw, Officers Maddox and Boone, and every IA supervisor linked to those deletions. I want them in my courtroom by tomorrow. Outside, a storm was truly beginning. Back at the APD precinct, the tension was explosive. Shaw paced his office, shouting into the phone. "You told me the files were wiped!" A voice on the other end tried to reason. "We deleted everything from the system. She must have gotten them before the purge." Then how the hell did she know about Malik Johnson? That name was scrubbed. "She's got help inside, Walt." Someone knew where to look. Shaw slammed the phone down. His hands trembled. Boone sat across from him, pale. "They just called. We're being pulled off active duty," Boone muttered. Shaw narrowed his eyes. "They're not going to find a damn thing, not if we get ahead of it." Boone leaned forward. "You mean—" Shaw's voice dropped. "We fix what we can still control. That drive, that woman. She can't testify again." Boone hesitated. "You want to threaten the Chief Justice of the state?" "She's not wearing the robe now. She's just a woman who pissed off the wrong people." But they didn't know that Simone had already anticipated this. That night, as she sat by her kitchen window, Natalie placed a burner phone in front of her. "Marshals are setting up a decoy route. You'll take a different vehicle tomorrow." "No one besides us will know where you're going." Simone nodded. "They'll come for me. I know." Natalie gave a tired smile. Then let them come. They're the ones in the dark now." Meanwhile, across town, Terrell Bellamy sat in the shadows of his old community boxing gym. He was watching an old surveillance feed Simone had sent him. The camera was grainy, but the audio was clear. It captured Maddox laughing as he shoved a boy into the back of a patrol car. "You think he even knows his name?" "They're all the same. No one's gonna miss him." Tyrell clenched his fists. That boy was Tyrell's godson. That file had been buried, but now it was out. Later that night, a masked figure sprayed red paint across the APD sign downtown. Just 2 words. "We remember." At dawn, as Simone prepared for her next testimony, her phone buzzed. A text message from a blocked number. "You should have stayed quiet. Now you're next." She stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it without flinching. Because they still didn't get it. She was never the one who needed protecting. She was the reckoning they never saw coming. And tomorrow, when they sat across from her in court, their uniforms wouldn't be shields. They'd be evidence. The hallway outside courtroom 14C was unusually quiet for a federal building about to detonate with truth. Simone Bellamy walked slowly down the corridor, flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals and her attorney, Natalie Trujillo. Her heels tapped against the floor like a ticking clock. Her calm exterior masked the storm boiling underneath. Behind her, a chain reaction had already begun. The files submitted in the last hearing had sparked a multi-agency task force. Internal affairs officers were suspended, federal subpoenas had gone out, and the officers who once dragged her into a police cruiser in handcuffs. They were now the ones about to stand trial. But something still didn't sit right. Simone paused at the courtroom door. "They're going to deny everything, you know," she murmured. Natalie gave a small nod. "Let them. You've already done the hard part. You exposed the lie." Inside the courtroom, Judge Callahan sat waiting, sharp-eyed and poised. The room was filled with federal agents, investigators, media lawyers, and observers. At the defense table, Officer Maddox sat in uniform, his face pale and tight. Beside him was Boone, eyes darting. Captain Walter Shaw hadn't shown up yet. That was the first red flag. Simone took her seat behind the prosecution. Agent Lena Price from the DOJ approached the bench. "Your Honor, We have just received notice that Captain Shaw failed to report to holding this morning. His home surveillance system was disabled at 3:14 a.m., and his vehicle tracker was manually removed. We have reason to believe he fled the state. The judge didn't blink. Issue a federal warrant. Alert Border Patrol and TSA. Maddox's attorney immediately stood. My client had no knowledge of Shaw's intentions. He has been fully cooperative and remains in the city as required. Simone leaned toward Natalie, voice low. They're going to spin it. Say Shaw acted alone. Natalie didn't take her eyes off the bench. Let them try. Agent Price continued, now projecting onto a screen. Your Honor, this footage was recovered from Officer Boone's personal cloud storage, dated 3 months before Ms. Bellamy's wrongful arrest. The screen flickered to life. A grainy video, time-stamped 2:03 a.m. In it, Boone and Maddox stand beside a patrol car. A young black teen sits handcuffed in the back seat. He's not going to say nothing, Maddox mutters. Boone chuckles. Don't need him to. Got the report written already. You know Shaw's clearing it. You sure? We already stacked him with priors. Kid talks, we're cooked. Who's gonna listen to a kid from Glenmore? He's got no lawyer, no people. He's just another name in the file. The courtroom was dead silent. Judge Callahan's gavel cracked once. That's enough. Boone shifted in his seat, sweating now. Maddox went stone still. Simone stood. Your Honor, I would like to submit a statement. He nodded. Proceed. She turned to face the room, not the judge. Not the cameras, the room. There are people in this city who never get to speak. Their names don't trend, their stories don't get televised, but they exist. And they matter. That boy in the video, his name was Elijah Carr. He was 17. He was arrested 6 times in 1 year without charges sticking, and now he's missing. No exit records, no transfer logs. His mother died thinking he ran away. She paused. He didn't run. He was disappeared, buried under paperwork and protected lies. From the gallery, someone gasped softly. People like Boone and Maddox didn't just abuse their badges, they weaponized them, and they did it because they believed the system would protect them more than the law would protect the people. Boone finally snapped. He shot up from his seat. This is insane. I was following orders. Shaw was the one pulling strings. Judge Callahan banged the gavel. Mr. Boone, sit down. No. You want the truth? Fine. Shaw had a list. Names, targets. He said they were problem communities. Said we had to keep numbers up. Keep the courts fed. He even said Bellamy was dangerous before she ever walked into that diner. Simone's eyes narrowed. Say that again. Boone looked at her, his jaw clenched. Shaw knew who you were, said you were a threat, said if we could scare you, maybe you'd back off whatever you were digging into. Natalie's voice cut in sharply. So it was premeditated. Boone nodded. Shaw planned the whole thing. The arrest. The story. Even had a judge lined up to misfile your complaint. The courtroom exploded in murmurs. Simone felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Judge Callahan called for order. Mr. Boone, you will remain in custody pending formal charges. Officer Maddox, you are now under criminal investigation for obstruction, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. Maddox's mouth dropped open. But I stayed quiet. I didn't even touch. That's exactly the problem, the judge said coldly. You let it happen. Outside, the press was already in chaos. Simone exited the courthouse surrounded by U.S. Marshals, flashbulbs erupting. Reporters shouted questions about the missing captain, about the files, about the now confirmed conspiracy inside the APD. But she didn't stop. Not yet. She stepped into the back of the waiting car, letting the door shut behind her. Only then did she finally breathe. Natalie looked over. You okay? Simone stared straight ahead. No, but I will be. Because now she wasn't just fighting back. She was winning. The U.S. Attorney's office in Atlanta was buzzing like a hornet's nest. Phones rang constantly, faxes flew in by the minute, and agents huddled around monitors glowing with federal warrants and flagged surveillance data. But in a quiet conference room on the top floor, Simone Bellamy sat alone at the head of a long oak table, her hands folded, her mind sharp. Across from her, Agent Lena Price stood reviewing a sealed folder marked Urgent. We found him, Lena said. Simone didn't react at first. She only blinked once. Where? Shaw crossed into Louisiana at 3:47 a.m. using an alias, Devin Keller. We tracked his burner phone to a small town outside Baton Rouge. He's holed up at a cabin owned by a retired APD officer. Local marshals are coordinating now. Simone stared at the folder, then lifted her eyes to meet Lena's. And what's the DOJ's move? We wait. Once he's in custody, we'll issue a national press release and move forward with the racketeering charges. Simone stood. No. Lena raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Simone's voice was steady. You don't wait on people like Shaw. You show the public the truth in real time. Every delay gives them room to rewrite the story. You want to go public today? I want to make sure the world sees this story before someone else distorts it. Lena hesitated, then nodded. Understood, but there's one more thing. She slid a photo across the table. It was a young man. Brown skin, deep-set eyes. The expression on his face was somewhere between cautious and defeated. His name's Elijah Carr. He was one of Shaw's earliest targets. Disappeared last year. Guess what? We found him. Simone's chest tightened. He was being held at an unlicensed rehab facility under a fake court order. The place is funded through a charity linked to Shaw's wife. It's essentially a modern-day detention center for kids they wanted to silence. Simone's fingers curled into fists. He's okay? Lena nodded. Malnourished. Terrified, but alive, and he remembers everything. He wants to testify. That was the crack in the dam, the beginning of the flood. By 3 p.m., Simone stood before a packed press conference in front of the federal courthouse. She didn't wear her robe. She didn't need it. The crowd knew who she was now. 2 weeks ago, I was arrested for being a black woman in the wrong diner at the wrong time, she began. But I wasn't alone. For years, this city has allowed predators with badges to decide who deserves justice and who doesn't. That ends now. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Captain Walter Shaw orchestrated a system of targeted harassment, fraudulent arrests, and forced disappearances. He exploited the silence of bureaucracy and the protection of politics. But thanks to brave witnesses and relentless investigators, the silence has broken. Reporters fired off questions. Cameras flashed. But Simone wasn't finished. To those who were ignored, silenced, or lost, this is your moment. You weren't crazy. You weren't forgotten. We heard you, and we're not done. As she stepped down, Elijah Carr was led gently onto the stage by his aunt. He looked out at the sea of microphones with the shaky courage of someone stepping into the light after years in the dark. I remember the sound of the locks, he said softly. The way they told me no one would believe me. But someone did. The clip aired nationwide. Within hours, more survivors began calling in. Mothers who had been told their sons were runaways. Kids who had been institutionalized for speaking out. Lawyers who had long suspected foul play but feared retaliation. That evening, back in Simone's townhouse, Natalie handed her a glass of wine and a small velvet box. "You got something in the mail?" she said. Simone opened the box. Inside was a silver lapel pin, the official insignia of the Georgia Supreme Court. A note was tucked beneath it. "For your courage in defending the law when it no longer defended you. Welcome home. The bench." Simone exhaled slowly, emotions welling. Natalie smiled. "You ready to put the robe back on?" Simone looked down at the pin, then out the window toward the city glowing under a blood-orange sky. "Not yet," she said. "Why not?" "Because this time, I'm not just here to judge. I'm here to rebuild." And in that moment, it was clear. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about transforming the very system that allowed the injustice to fester. A war had begun. But now, Simone wasn't standing alone. The federal courtroom in downtown Atlanta was filled to capacity. No cameras were allowed inside, but every bench was packed with victims, journalists, law students, and concerned citizens. What had begun as a wrongful arrest of a black woman in a diner had snowballed into one of the most consequential civil rights trials of the decade. Simone Bellamy stood tall, dressed not in her judicial robes, but in a fitted navy suit. Her poise was unshakable. To her left sat Elijah Carr, now healthier and more grounded, flanked by his aunt and two child advocates. Across the aisle, Captain Walter Shaw sat stiff, his eyes sunken, his jaw clenched. The confidence he once wore like armor had cracked. His defense attorney whispered frantically in his ear as the judge entered. U.S. District Judge Marin Locke called the court to order. "This is the final hearing regarding United States v. Walter Shaw and affiliated officers of the Atlanta Police Department. Today we will hear closing arguments and deliver sentencing on multiple counts of civil rights violations, abuse of authority, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice." The assistant U.S. attorney presented his closing arguments with methodical clarity. This was not a lapse in judgment. This was not a mistake. This was a criminal enterprise carried out under the guise of law enforcement. The accused used their badges as weapons to control, to silence, and to disappear vulnerable lives. The system failed, but the people did not. Then it was Simone's turn. She stood, walked to the center of the courtroom, and took a moment to look into the eyes of every person in the room. "I was not just arrested," she began. "I was dehumanized. I was treated like someone without a name, without rights, without worth. And I am not alone." She turned toward Shaw. "You built a system that preyed on fear, but you underestimated memory. You underestimated the will of survivors. You underestimated the strength of people who refused to be erased." Her voice wavered for only a second. "But most of all, you underestimated me." There was silence. Judge Locke nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Bellamy. Please return to your seat." Before sentencing was handed down, Shaw unexpectedly rose from his chair. "Your Honor, I would like to speak." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Simone didn't flinch. Judge Locke nodded. "Proceed." Shaw's voice was hoarse. "I didn't start it. I wasn't the first. I inherited a system that was already broken. I just learned how to use it." He looked at Simone for the first time without hatred, without smugness, only defeat. "But I see now. You were never powerless. I was." Judge Locke responded swiftly. "Acknowledgement does not absolve consequence. Mr. Shaw, this court sentences you to 40 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." Murmurs surged. A few people clapped but were immediately hushed. As Shaw was led away in cuffs, he paused, just for a second, to look back, not at Simone, but at Elijah. The boy didn't look away. Outside, a sea of reporters gathered as Simone stepped up to a podium surrounded by microphones. "This isn't the end," she said. "This is the beginning of a greater reckoning. We have uncovered a systemic failure, but we are not here just to punish. We are here to rebuild. We will review every case handled by the officers involved. We will restore names that were stolen and rights that were denied." A reporter shouted, "Judge Bellamy, are you returning to the bench?" Simone smiled faintly. "Not just yet. Right now, I'm returning to the people, because justice doesn't begin in a courtroom. It begins in community." That night, back at home, Natalie and Simone sat on the back porch, the city lights flickering in the distance. A soft breeze rustled the trees overhead. "Do you regret it?" Natalie asked quietly. "No," Simone replied. "If anything, I regret not acting sooner." Elijah sat nearby, writing in a notebook. He looked up. "Can I read something to you?" Simone nodded. He cleared his throat. "I used to think silence kept me safe. Now I know silence is what they count on, so I'll keep speaking. Because every time I speak, I get a little closer to who I really am." Natalie wiped her eyes. Simone leaned over and placed a hand gently on Elijah's shoulder. "You're already exactly who you're meant to be." As the screen door creaked open behind them, Simone's phone buzzed. An email subject line popped up. "National Task Force Proposal, Civil Rights Accountability." It was from the DOJ. She looked at it for a beat, then hit reply. "Yes, I'm in." And so, the woman who had been stripped of her dignity in a back booth of a southern diner was now helping lead a movement that would touch every corner of the country. She had not just survived the system, she had changed it. If this story moved you, share it. Let others hear what happens when truth speaks louder than fear. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next voice we amplify might be the one the world is still trying to silence. Stay with us. The fight for justice continues.